Oh,
Hello.
hello.
Hey,
Hello.
Yeah,
doing good
pretty
here.
Yeah, we had a bloody fantastic day today. More sunshine than everything, which was amazing. So I haven't seen so much sun in 2 weeks. So uh,
Yeah, they say they can't hear you.
Oh no.
Let's see here. Can you guys hear everybody else?
1, 2 testing.
yeah, it would be good if we.
How's that? No.
Thorsten,
Yeah, I should be hopefully there. So yeah, let's see.
Strange.
Yeah. Okay.
every
So
it's an adventure.
it's only Rob, and
I'll
I
tell
go
you, there
blue
you go.
again.
I'm back. I'm back in the room. So whilst I sort, because I now need to sort everything else out. Just bear with me. For some reason, I was going to flick to Ben. Yep, that's coming through there. Although Ben's resized. So by way of an excuse, I rearranged my studio over the last couple of days, and I thought I'd set everything up and saved it all, and it does appear that some things didn't fly over, but we're looking good now. So can we just get a thumbs up? We got some yes, 3 all good except Rob. So can everybody hear me now? Once we get a thumbs up, then we can crack on. Simon says, Rob, you had it. I don't know what that. Video bandwidth is suffering a bit stop-starty. Okay. I think there's not a huge amount we can do in that. Yes, good. Right. And then Thorsten's screen has just gone blue.
Okay, Baidu says.
Okay, cool.
Okay, good.
Now.
Let's start a show. So, welcome everyone. This is the second live official show of ProSynth Network, and we have all 3 of the kind of moderators, admin team of the Facebook group here. We have our founder, Ben Simpson. Hello, Ben. How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Good.
Feeling
what have
a
you
lot
been up to
better
this
now.
week?
Mainly relaxing. I have got a bit of studio work going on at the minute, but it's mainly for Electro 80s, nothing for me personally, but still active.
Cool.
Nonetheless.
Excellent stuff. And of course we have Cryss over in California. Hello, Cryss. How are you?
Good. Well, I guess it's good afternoon or good evening to you guys. Yeah, we're doing well. Just been working on some sound stuff this week, and of course we all are on lockdown, so that's interesting. But my wife and I are both introverts, so we're pretty happy.
Excellent. Well, glad to hear that you're all well, so that's good to hear. We can pretty much get back
Wagyu says, can you lower it to 720p, maybe? Would that help?
Yeah, I think that's not going to do much in terms of that. Is it kind of... Yeah, okay. Right, sorry about that. We seem to have dropped away, but we're back. So we were just saying hi to Cryss, and so like I said, we've got our first kind of proper official guest on the show today, and that's Thorsten Heinze. Hello, Thorsten. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So we had a sunny day in London, and kids are now in bed, which is great. So I can enjoy a little bit my studio tonight. So that's what my main focus also the week. So learning new stuff on my synth.
So how are you spending the days in quarantine?
Yeah, I mean, partly working because I can work from home, which is great. So and the other part, I mean, I spend with the kids around because they're frustrated due to the and else at night I do things like music, sitting down there writing new patches at the moment. So it's one thing I'm working on, trying to learn all my synthesizers, nooks and crannies. So this kind of things at the moment is mainly what am I focused
Cool.
on.
So I guess.
And sorry for being so blue.
So I guess most people in the chat room have come across you, either through Jamie's videos or through the group itself. But just tell us a little about yourself from a musical perspective. What it is that you do, what have you done in the past, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm general synthesizer fan, writing composer. So I do that for games and movie elements. So I worked in the games industry for 26 years now, and delivered quite a lot of soundtrack elements to it, and did it also for movie elements. And yeah, I'm really exciting with new hardware, new synthesizers, learning their things, and being active part of the community. So for me, it's a very long-term thing because my family is for ages, centuries in music. So it's also a traditional element in the family. Cool. So yeah. For me, music is pretty much my main life. Yeah.
So you say video games. Are there any video games that? Sorry, Cryss.
Sorry, I think I'm only 5,500 miles away, so I think there's a little bit of lag because Jamie has talked about how the COVID has affected his business with sound design. How has it affected the video game business and your involvement with it?
Yeah, I mean, it affected movie as well as games the same way. So pretty much everything is on freeze, on hold. So every work I had for Q1 and Q2, pretty much 70% is canned completely. So where they put the things indefinitely on hold. So they don't know if they ever return to it, and other things have been already moved to Q3 as early as starting date. So yes, it affected me quite a lot there. And I'm lucky that I have still another main day job, which keeps everything running. But I know not a lot of people are very lucky to have that also running. So it's a struggle for a lot, and for me, it's also not too easy. So I mean, it's not that I can jump around and make a party, but it's a troublesome thing, and I see a lot of friends suffering and having real problems with it. So it has a profound effect.
Yeah, it's definitely hit like live performance, hasn't it? Obviously, but I really feel like I'm lucky as well. I've got like 2 jobs, but a lot of people, their income's just been totally annihilated by this, hasn't it? I know we've gone from like 100 gigs a year to like obviously because nobody can gig, but none. And there's people in the band that is their only income, and it's just a nightmare, really, that way. Yeah,
and I mean, I know a lot of people who do sound design or just work in the area, like tutorials and everything, or training. I mean, we have a good friend of us is violin teacher for my daughter, and I mean, for her everything is frozen. She does a couple of people via Skype, but I mean, it's not really the same like teaching in the same room, and not too many people do that. So it's really hitting people everywhere wrong. Any form of entertainment. I mean, I know any kind of show from or movie is completely frozen, which I've never seen in the games industry. Also, I mean, they first time really struggled to cope with the situation, so it put pretty much everything on hold. So like Naughty Dog's like a news release now, The Last of Us 2 and everything is just put on hold indefinitely until they know any better and have no idea how to come back. So it's pretty harsh, yeah.
Yeah, it's not it's not a great place to be at the moment, unfortunately. But from a personal perspective, I have a day job that I work from home anyway, and we're not really affected yet. Although the general business as a whole has suffered because the company I work for, we make physical access control systems and secure identity products. And a lot of the construction projects that would be buying in from distributors that we supply, everything's on hold, so nobody's buying stuff. So hopefully they'll all come back at some point and we won't lose the business, it'll just be delayed. But it's a crazy time.
Yeah.
It's a crazy time.
But it's also an opportunity, like Thorsten said, to learn your gear and, really get into the nitty gritty of it, those hidden features that you didn't know it had, and it's an opportunity for that. You've got to make the most of the bad situation, And
like Mark presented today, I think that was really nice to see when Mark made his 5.8 patch number 5, and he was showing us off a feature on WaveStation which is not intended to going above audio rate LFO, which this kind of things. I think this is really great to figure out. So I mean. Yeah, there's a lot which you can just try to get your head around and see what you can do. Push the boundaries.
Hey, let me interrupt. We may be having some problems. Just checking the feed, and it seems to be very intermittent.
Yeah, I'm looking at the drop frame rate here. It's pretty high, which is not the norm. So,
I asked if the video audio is playing well now, but have not got any response from it.
Yeah, it does seem. I think we might.
I mean, the only video which makes a problem for me is Robbie's. Yeah, I mean, I see you, Cryss, and Ben completely perfect.
No, there seems to be a thing where certain cameras at certain times or certain feeds of individuals, like at the moment, everyone's fine, but then I go to that shot and Thorsten turns into a nice kind of pale blue square, and then Cryss sometimes goes that way as well, and it's all a bit odd. So let me just I'm getting some messages here as well saying that the bandwidth is shocking. There's one. So let's see. Unfortunately, this is with everyone at home. Everyone's caning the internet. Probably my kids are as well. Synthient sound, please.
Kick him out. Use your. Sorry. I said kick your kicks out. Get your kids out. Use a router and just block everyone.
Well, I was just thinking because my son has just bought himself a PlayStation Now subscription. So I'm just going to try and figure out if he's killing that at the moment.
Downloading.
Yeah. Just saying.
That sounds like it. Love your wall, Ben.
That's probably amazing.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It's all the way around.
Well, as it's going right now.
I mean, my drop frame rate is sitting at 47% on average, which is pretty bad.
Oh my.
And nothing else has changed, so it's either got to be an issue with because I'm obviously sending everything out from here, but I have fibre here, so I've got pretty good bandwidth. Okay. I'm conscious that this is not making for a thoroughly entertaining show, but I want to get it right. So if I bang this MAC address from the router, Wagyu says yes. I think I might have to do that at certain times of the day. I used to when he was a bit younger and taking the mickey. So let's see. Right. I'm just going to stop the stream. So we're starting the stream again. And, oh, blimey, that drop frame rate is crazy. 75%.
I hope I'm not
No.
causing anything.
It's not you. I mean, everyone else has got their own individual bandwidths, but you're all coming into me through Skype. It could just be Skype. But according to this, the drop frames from the stream are pretty high. They're higher than I've ever seen them. All right, let's see if we can change some resolutions here. Right, I'm going to have to do this. Could somebody just type in the chat and just let them know, because I'm not... Drop it down to 720 and see if that helps. Oh, I thought it was, and now it's just... it's okay, so...
Vagu says thumbs up, so they know it.
So we've dropped the stream resolution a bit, and I'm not entirely sure what kind of a difference that makes, but let's crack on. Let me just make sure that everything...
Yep.
The feed still is pausing.
Yeah, still see you freeze every couple of 10-15 frames. You have a small hiccup. That's the hiccup's about 20 frames, and then now it's gone. Let's just see. I think now we're going to restart the stream. Yeah, still the same. Yeah.
Oh, this is...
Someone suggested we should make real video. We should rent a TV. It's funny, somehow my day-to-day job in a really weird way, but not really, because I'm also digital. So
Right.
Yeah, we're down to 720p now. It looks better.
Good.
It looks better now. I can't see you drop so much frames anymore. It's a lot better.
Coming up high.
Looks
okay.
looks good.
All right. Well, let's see if we can crack on. And anyone, if we do drop quality really badly, do let us know in the chat room. We won't take offence, but we're going to try and soldier on through. So, okay, I think we should start looking at some of our topics. So, Cryss made us aware of this one, so we're going to go over to the topics, and this is the news that Summer NAMM 2020 in Nashville is the latest victim of show cancellation. It was scheduled for July 9 through 11 in Nashville, but obviously due to the current situation that we find ourselves in, this is not going ahead. So another show bites the dust. Cryss, do you want to talk to this one a bit?
I think we were expecting this to happen, as these other trade shows have already been canceled. It's kind of a bummer. You know, this NAMM show is something I think all of us look forward to twice a year. Although, to be honest, the winter NAMM is usually better.
From a synth perspective.
At least it has been in the past. For and from a guitarist perspective, it's way better. So, what are some of the other favorite shows? We have Superbooth, and what are the other ones?
So Superbooth, Messe in Frankfurt. I know that there's lots of smaller shows. Like I do a few here in the UK. So I was scheduled to do one in London at the beginning of July, and that has now gone by the wayside. That was it was a fairly new event. It started in New York. I forget the name of it now, but it's small, but you know, kind of got some big names attending, and I was going to be there with IK, but that's gone by the wayside. We have another one over here called Synthesized, which is kind of a small event that takes place at the Centre for Computing History in Cambridge, where it's a kind of a 2-day weekend event where there's all sorts of stuff going on. And this year we still are hoping to have a Fairlight, a Synclavier, and a PPG all in the same room at the same time working. But that, I think, is probably going to disappear. But who knows? We'll see. But it's Summer NAMM's always the poorer cousin, isn't it? Winter NAMM's the one that we all get excited about. Hopefully, by the time that rolls around, this will all blown over. But we talked about Superbooth. So the guy behind Superbooth, whose name currently escapes me, has decided to do Superbooth 20 Home Edition, which I thought was an interesting take on things. So he's released a video here on the Superbooth website, and he's got a lot of the internet's favourite synthesizer people to do contributions to that. So the first one we'll see here on screen is our good friend Nick Batt from Sonic State. So he's going to be doing some stuff, and there's going to be other websites contributing as well to the event. So we've got other people like Heimbach here in Berlin and Konstantin in Sweden. This guy, Amazona, they're going to be doing some stuff. So there's going to be lots of stuff and content, and hopefully we'll see maybe some announcements, because I was hoping for Korg to officially announce the Op 6. There's also going to be concerts as well, which is really interesting. But what do you guys think about Superbooth Home Edition? Ben, over to you, sir.
Well, thank you. I think it's a good idea. It's the best we've got at the minute. You can still see things, although you can't get the hands on, obviously. But you know, we've got to work around the situation the best we can, haven't we? And I think it'll still be interesting. Still plenty of news to see, and you know that'll do for me.
It's going to be difficult because you're going to have manufacturers that might take part in this and announce products, but then their whole production lines have probably ground to a halt, and distribution chain has ground to a halt. So they'll be telling us about all this wonderful stuff, and we won't be able to get it. What do you think, Thorsten?
Yeah,
I think faces. I mean, we see that with everyone, but I think especially for the smaller companies, is pretty much a lifeline he's thrown there. So, which I think is really positive, because I think for a lot of these companies, everything would disappear.
Yeah.
No, now they have at least still visibility, and I think that's really a key thing, because most of them really are now submarine mode, because nothing is really anywhere, and there's no trade shows anywhere. And I think having this kind of platform where people are really looking for their stuff is giving some possibly survival capability, which I think is very positive. And I'm sure we see pretty cool stuff there. I mean, Uwe wanted to show some stuff, other companies wanted to release stuff. So, as you say, you hope for your OP6 as a FM fan times 10. So I think this kind of things are really helping.
Well, I was all down to go to Superbooth this year as well. And I hung back because I wasn't sure if I could afford it. That's the thing. Nobody was going to pay for me to go. So I thought, well, it's okay. I know some good hotels in Berlin, and I've got friends that live out there, so I can, you know, if I can't get a hotel, I can sit on the sofa. And I kind of waited, and then this thing kind of hit sort of February time, and I thought, I'll just wait, and I'll wait. And thankfully, I waited long enough, and it all got called off, so I didn't lose money. But I was really disappointed because I've not been to Superbooth, and that was an interesting one. So I'll make the most of it, hopefully next year. Cryss, you wanted to?
Yeah.
Well, one of the things, I'm not so pessimistic about the production problems. One thing with capitalism that we can count on is that people want to make profit, and I don't have anything against that, because if these companies stay moving, people are employed, they make a living, they feed their kids. But as a byproduct of that, I think these companies are going to be figuring out how can we keep going. I think I recall seeing a post from Behringer saying that they're getting their factories going again. I don't remember the details on that. But yeah, trade shows in big public gatherings of people might be gone for the moment, but hopefully we'll still be seeing. I mean, they're going to be continuing to develop synthesizers and other gear. So hopefully we'll still see things coming out, maybe being announced in different ways. I mean, we've seen how everything has gone to live stream. And so I think we would expect that a lot of these companies are all of a sudden starting to react to that and go like, oh, we have got to get on top of this so that we stay current, so people are still buying our products.
Absolutely. I think the internet is going to bear the load in this, and I think it's also I think it's highlighted to many people that internet is an essential service nowadays. It's like your water, electricity, gas, whatever. It's an essential thing, and there are many countries. I mean, I can speak from a UK perspective, is that we don't have the best internet infrastructure out there. There are places with much faster, bigger bandwidth, and now we're noticing the strain on the system, as evidenced with our own experience here tonight. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see all this stuff online. Ben, you got anything to add?
I think it's interesting that, I mean, I don't know the working conditions, but, is it possible for them to carry on producing, the equipment? Because there's no problem really with the retail, because the internet have more or less taken over the retail sector of electronic music instruments, at least anyway, hadn't it? So there's no problem getting it, getting it sold. It's just the production of the thing that might be affected.
Yeah.
Well, we're having a problem with professional musicians, gigging musicians, working musicians, having their incomes cut because of this, but still the greater market is not for working musicians, but for just people who enjoy music and buy synthesizers and guitars and whatnot. So that I wouldn't expect to see a big dip at the manufacturing level, but actually with working musicians are going to be having the hardest time with this, whereas people who just play for enjoyment are still, if they got their day job, they're going to still be buying stuff. And so hopefully that will keep us going until the musicians are able to get back to work.
It does seem that there's kind of a staggered thing, because we've had the the center of the outbreak allegedly is China. So that's borne the brunt of its early doors, and of course that affected surrounding areas such as Malaysia, the Philippines, Taiwan, Japan, and as they're kind of passing through and coming down the other side, then the rest of the world is now getting hit and going through that. So as far as we're concerned in the Western world, and that's where I guess most of us are based and living, and certainly people watching tonight, on the Western side of the world, we're still at that point where distribution and access to the products is limited. I mean, I have to say, I bought my stand that you see behind me there, and I bought that online last Friday from Thomann in Germany, and I bought it on a Friday night, and it was here on Wednesday morning. Absolutely no delay, and they've clearly got lots and lots of stock, but that stock, I guess, is going to start to dwindle. But then, even though people are out there buying stuff, if they're not working or they're living on a furloughed salary, where it's maybe, I mean, I've seen figures bandied around from 25% to 75% reduction in earnings, then people aren't going to be buying this this stuff for a little while because they need to just eat and survive and what have you. So it's a very capitalism, hey? It's a winner. Anyway, on that note,
it will be
it's
tough
going to be tough for
well.
everyone, I think, and it's going to cascade, and there's going to be lots of things change. So yeah, it's depressing. I'm fed up, right? And I get the irony of what I'm about to say. I'm fed up of watching TV programs with people using bad internet connections and devices, and interviewing all these people from their front rooms with. Yeah, it's just. Yeah. Never mind. Right, let's move on to something a little bit more cheerful. Shall we talk?
Okay, we good?
Yeah, I think we're back in the room. Sorry, guys, we seem to crap out there. So yeah, I think we're good. Right. Okay. So I was saying. So this is a topic that Cryss brought up. So I'm going to bring him up, and then let's have a look at this topic. So why that? Why have I got the Skype screen there? This is crazy. Right, okay, sorry, just bear with. Okay, so now we're there. Right, so hopefully you should be seeing a couple of TD303s, or just TD3s, because they had to change the name, didn't they? This is the Behringer 303 clone. Can't get any audio on this, unfortunately, because I've not patched that in properly, but let's see if I can... if you guys can hear that very well. So this is an interesting and different use of what is traditionally a very genre-specific instrument, the 303. So, Cryss, what did you want to kind of talk about with this one?
Yeah, so something that had been in my mind is the use of very particular instruments and how they lead you towards certain genres. So I had an experience where, again, in the 90s, I wasn't really doing much synthesizer stuff. It was all guitar. But we had gotten, my best friend and I had gotten this, I think it was called Rebirth,
Yes.
as an app. It was like a TB303 app. And so we had no idea about anything acid. And so we were making these little songs on there like, hey, we're experimenting with synthesizers. And it was acid. I mean, that's all it was. We'd never heard it and had no idea about it, but that's what came out of it. And then more recently, I had seen a picture of Pete Townsend with a TB303. I think he was sitting on an airline flight or something playing with it. And it got me thinking a little bit about how certain instruments kind of focus where on the path of least resistance towards certain musical genres. And I found this Firechild video where he's using the TB303 to do kind of neoclassical music. And I thought that was very interesting as far as how instruments really kind of shape that. Like, for instance, a Fender Telecaster, people aren't picking up to play metal, but you see a ton of country guitarists play it. Or the TB303 is like the acid synthesizer. And so I wanted to ask, like, what synthesizers, first of all, let's talk about what synthesizers do you feel like are very genre or music specific that you've seen that like people almost always associate with a certain genre? And I've got a couple of follow-up questions.
Ben, over to you. Throw you in at the deep end, mate.
Wow. I was just going to say about the TB303 first before I try and come up with an example myself. Well, we got one back in the day, ages and ages ago, and we didn't have the acid discovery that Cryss had, unfortunately. We were like trying to use it to play bass lines because we thought that's what you were supposed to do with it, proper bass lines. We had like a pulsating bass, and this is my point with this. is that it got so tedious programming the thing. Like for every couple of bars, you had to do another pattern and move it around, and it was quite insane the way it worked. Even now, it still horrifies me. That's probably where that repetitive looping came from, isn't it? I can't be bothered making anything else. Let's stick let's stick with this pattern. And then after a bit, thinking, actually, this sounds really good. Repeating like this. Let's evolve the pattern instead. Do what's easier. Tweak it instead of changing the notes. Let's change the tone of it. That maybe was significant in the evolution of that kind of music. The only example I can really think of it is the Polymoog and Newman. I can't. It's like whenever you hear that, I don't think I've ever heard it doing anything that didn't have that ethereal kind of haunting.
Yeah.
Loveliness. I don't know what else it is famous for being used on, but like as soon as I hear that's
and also from that perspective, even the CS80 always gets branded as the Vangelis synth, and that will obviously lead you down a particular style of music. Although the CS80 obviously is like I'd say the Polymoogs wasn't as what's the word? Didn't have a huge amount going for it. That Vox Humana sound was the thing, whereas the CS80 was like a fully programmable, massive, polysynth. So, Thorsten, any thoughts on this one? Any instruments that?
I was handled most of the time. That time was things like the Quasi-Media Virus TI, which were very gone on to one direction, which was all techno. And I used my Virus TI mostly for rather etherical and soundscape and atmospheres, to be honest, because it's very, very capable of doing those due to its massive amounts of special effects and the vast LFO and envelope section, so I could do a lot there. So, but yeah, these things were driven down one road by pretty much everyone. It was just used in one way, and it was always sounding very similar due to that. Yeah, I think there has been that thing. For me, the weird reinvigorating was similar to you, the SHO1. So when I had my one-on-one at the time, that was usually the typical 80s pop bass. Would you just play the typical style? You had everything in the 80s style, and now I use it very differently. So it's changed. You can, and I'm anywhere a person who uses synthesizers and everything else in a far more free way. So I don't care if I need to stick 2-3 synthesizers together to make one sound, because for me it's all about getting the sound, and I don't care where it comes from. Can be VST, hardware synth, guitar, via pedal effects, whatever, as long as I get the target. And I think a lot of people need to think more out of the box. A lot of people are very boxed, and this is really a thing which I think is hindering a lot of people. Look at Matt Buxley. When he plays, he's doing so much different things with his funk, but he's sitting there and using the instruments in certain ways and can play fantastically. But you see others which don't think anywhere longer and just very focused on only one thing. I've seen a couple of bands, friends of mine doing some gothic stuff, and since the 80s, their sound has changed a bit, but it's in essential still the same thing. They never did anything out of their comfort zone. I think that's where it lands on.
I was going to say, I was going to add to that list.
There's a few more examples.
I was just to say, to add to that list, there was that period in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, where everybody wanted a 303, an 808, and a 909, and maybe an SH101. And there was those four instruments that were so synonymous with the dance music of the day, because it was, they'd all been thrown out by their original owners because they'd been superseded by DX7s, D50s, all the big digital stuff. Nobody wanted this old, antiquated analog gear anymore. And so it became the underground music of the day, and people were buying these things up cheaply, and it became that sound. And of course, we know that the 303 was never designed to be an acid synth. It was designed to be an accompaniment synth, and it failed miserably. It sold very poorly for Roland. And the same with the 606 that paired with it. And then, of course, kids, find it, in junk stores or in their grandfather's attic, and they pull it out and start, hey, what's this? And they created something new with it, but then it becomes synonymous with that style. But, the 808 and the 909, if I hear a 909 in anything that's not house music, then it sounds like out of place to me, because it's just that sound is so synonymous with that thing. Going through various patches on any synth, I think you'll find that there's stuff that has just been overused in every genre. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head, but the 303 is one of those.
It's interesting.
Sure, go ahead, Ben.
It's interesting that you say the 909 is so heavily associated with dance music, and yet, as far as I know, that, like you say about the TB303, that wasn't its original intent. Is that where creativity is really interesting, in the fact that like people get something, not really aware of what its original intention was, but use it for something completely different, and that's you're getting something. It's not what Roland intended. It's probably not what the person who bought it it cheaply intended. But this new thing comes out, and obviously, as soon as everybody realizes how good it sounds, they all jump aboard, don't they?
There was once a time when people sold synthesizers, or manufacturers sold synthesizers as just musical instruments. They never kind of forced you down a route. So even in the 80s, the DX7 was never sold as a synth for a particular genre, a synth for a particular style. And it was only once we started to get to the kind of the real heavy dance music boom of the late 80s and the early 90s that all the manufacturers cottoned on to this thing, because they're getting left behind. They're all producing digital instruments now. Everybody wants a 303, as the song says. And so now what do? Well, we need to produce instruments that fit what people want. And so Yamaha, I remember, because I kind of bought into it, the CS1X and its follow-ons, the RM1X sequencer. It was just packed full of electronic music style. I mean, the RM1X itself, which is a superb little sequencer groove box, but it had something like, I forget, 60 sound sets, and each one of them was named after a genre of electronic dance music. You had Berlin, you had New York, you had trance, you had Goa, you had jungle. They were all in there. It was, we're going to throw this instrument directly at that genre, and even though under the hood you could actually get it to do lots of other things, everyone bought it because it was that, So, and then Roland did the same with their MC 303s and 505s, and every kind of manufacturer got in on producing genre-specific instruments. And I would rather be sold a synth as an instrument to make music however you want to make it, rather than it being something that is designed for one thing and one thing only, because then that's just limiting. It's horrible.
Yeah, and to the point, I mean, going back a little bit, it seems that the economics of the situation have influenced these, musical genres, because, you have these TB303s and 808s and 909s and all this falling out of favor. And the same thing with, the 70s era guitar equipment, the pedals, the old fuzz pedals and things like that. They just went away. And in the late 80s, you had the guys in spandex with the huge refrigerator-sized racks with eventides and lexicons. And then right after that big heyday in the, starting right in the early 90s, you had this movement that comes back and goes, we can't afford any of that stuff. Screw all those people. Let's do grunge. I can buy a $20 1975 Big Muff Pie and a Marshall, and I'll go out and make some music. And then that became the sound of a new genre, just the same way it did for things like techno and acid and all these other genres. We can't make music with the gear that's popular right now. That's we can't afford that. So let's see if we can make it with some other old gear, which has been an interesting thing because it's given more life to this old gear than it had in its original heyday when it was released.
Definitely.
So let me ask you this.
No.
Go ahead.
Fine, go ahead.
So when when each of us, and by the way, there were some great examples given in the chat room. ACO heads talking about trance like the JP8000, the Super Saw type stuff, Sasquatch DX7. I was thinking about the Mellotron and prog rock. Sure, like the Fairlight and its effect on pop music. By the way, I don't have it going right now. So when you guys buy a piece of gear that is well known for certain genres, DX7 and pop, or TB303 and acid, what are your strategies as far as what you get out of it? If you're not making that type of music. I mean, Thorsten started with it, talking about this a little bit back, and how taking something like the virus and using it. I think it was a virus, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and using it for a new purpose. What are your strategies in doing that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the virus capabilities with the nice filters, as well as the very powerful envelopes it had, were for me particularly very useful for the creation of soundscapes. So, and its ability to wavetable style modulate elements. So that gave me an ability to create really weird new textures, which were not available at the time on anything else. And I really also the capability of being totally integrated made it also interesting. So I was able to edit it quite quickly, quite a lot, and towards material I needed to work against. So when you work with movies, you have track points you need to hit, so cues, and I could set up sound effects so that they hit the cues in a very particular way, which was not possible with other synthesizers like this at the time because it was the first one. And that gave me capabilities which I couldn't face on any other hardware synth and software synth also at that given time, because it was pretty unique, and the sound was really good, had great polyphony, and I could use most of the time 8 or 9 tracks on it, with all the sound effects which I was using and everything. So I could create quite a soundscape out of it already, and have still pads and bass lines and leads on it, while having still the sound texture working in the background. So it was one thing where I really looked at it. And for me, the most elements were really based on how can I create something which fits to the scene, and how can I mend the synthesizer to do the job. And this was really one thing where I could use it. Yeah.
Excellent. Ben, how about you?
I kind of come at it from a completely different angle, I think. I know what you're saying about like the Fairlight being associated with, well, so many things, but like Trevoron and Thomas Dolby and things like that. So when I finally got a semi decent Fairlight plug-in, because I'm not like Robbie, I don't have the real thing just tucked in the background, I wanted to make stuff like that. I wanted to kind of pretend I was Trevor Arm for the afternoon, that was my first instinct to do with the Fairlight stuff. But with the stuff I buy, the hardware, it's like with Electro 80s, we do a lot of research into how the tracks were made in the first place, and obviously you hear a lot of it, but like things like the Pro One, the Behringer Pro One, I got that because I wanted to recreate Vince Clarke sounds. Got the Prophet 5, the Prophet 6 rather, for obvious reasons, because that is on a lot of stuff. And the Moog, really, that's again. So I'm hearing these sounds, and I've got to try and get them as near as I can, and then sample them all, put them into main stage, and go out and play live with them. So I am looking at the same subject, but I'm looking at it completely differently, because it's not mainly for original composition. The original composition is I work with what I've got because I bought it for the needs of the band.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How about you, Robbie?
You see, I'm not a working musician anymore. As you know, so everything I buy is mainly to satisfy a desire for owning something that is important to me musically and that I can just relate to. So the Fairlight stuff, well, that's a whole different thing. But I don't buy new synthesizers so much anymore. I go for the old stuff because it just I've always wanted it. So it's kind of I don't buy. I mean, like the DX stuff. I've always wanted a DX7. Still don't own a DX7. I know I've got other examples, but I still don't. I still want a DX7. Why do I want one? Because not because of the sounds it makes or the music I could make with it. It's just because it's an iconic synth, and I have this thing about collecting iconic synths. When I bought the Prophecy, which was mid-90s, when the whole electronic dance music thing was in full swing and the Prophecy was adding its own little thing to it, I didn't buy it because it was anything to do with that. I bought it because it made really interesting sounds. I've always preferred the acoustic modelling rather than the virtual analog stuff that it does. Nowadays you don't need to buy anything that's specifically everything's virtual analog almost. So yeah, I mean, it's difficult really. I buy stuff for different reasons, I guess, to a lot of other people, because of the historical nature of the connection. Is an emotional thing with me more than anything else. But I remember those days in the 90s really well, where everything was. I used to go into my local music retailer when such things existed on the high street here, and I was just always really disappointed that 90% of the gear on display was all aimed at electronic dance music creation. Everything was coloured in bright yellows and greens and blues and purples. It all had filter knobs that you could make squelchy sounds with. Well, I know that everyone was crying out for that stuff back then, but I wasn't. I wanted big pads and dreamy ethereal landscape type sounds and cinematic sounds, and there was just nothing there. And that's why I sampling was always a thing for me, because I get to choose what goes into those things. I choose the sounds, not somebody else.
Sample-based synthesizers, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Fairlight is one thing. You can put anything into the Fairlight. The Fairlight gives you a character. What really, I guess, sets the Fairlight apart is the way that you can use it to program your songs. The sequencing. That you can hear. I've said this many a time. I can hear a Fairlight sequence more clearly than I can hear Fairlight sound in a particular song. If you play me a song, I can say, oh yeah, that's a Fairlight. That's page R right there. So it was just the way it helped you make music was it's one of its signatures.
Yeah, indeed. I think for myself, having not come from like the electronic world, it's influenced me different ways because I don't have the history with it, and I don't feel equipped to make a lot of that dance music. I mean, there's some great people making dance music, and I just don't feel like I understand it enough to make anything that would be good. So it's kind of when I think about loving synthesizers, love programming, but then what do I do with it with music? It's always been a little bit of a puzzle. So I've been making these weird tracks that, the stuff that's on my YouTube channel are all experiments. They're not the normal stuff that I would write. So it's been kind of a fun game for me to see what can I make this do and what kinds can I marry together to create new things. And of course, I was very influenced by the Beatles, who did a lot of that themselves, where they would go into Abbey Road Studios, and thank goodness they had George Martin who would let them do all this stuff. But what can we use this on a track, and what can we do with it that might not be right, but it'll be great? And so, so an example like Tomorrow Never Knows, and John Lennon wanting to affect his voice and sound like whatever it was, 1,000 monks on chanting. And so they ran his voice through a Leslie rotating speaker and to give it another whole vibe to it. But I think that would be a great example. Like, it's not meant to do that, but it sounds really cool. And of course, Black Sabbath did it with Planet Caravan right afterwards, a few years later, or 5 years later or so.
Yeah, I often wonder what the Beatles would have done. For example, we take them because they were the big studio creators. They were the band, I guess, and with George Martin, they made the studio their instrument, which I don't think had been done before. What they would have done with the technology that we have, whether it's sampling or synthesizers in general. I mean, I know that towards the end they dabbled with some Moog modulars, but what would the Beatles have done with sampling? Or was it the fact that they didn't have sampling and they had tapes and they were just cutting stuff up, throwing it in the air, and then piecing it back together again? Would they have done such great stuff with digital sampling? Who knows?
Sasquatch is mentioning that vast quantity of drugs have always been involved in groundbreaking music.
This is very true.
And that certainly plays into it. One interesting thing with the Beatles is you didn't see that kind of experimentation continue in their music after they broke up. What happened to all that? I mean, there was Paul McCartney experimented with some synthesizers, but
George did an album, didn't he?
George
did a solo album called Electronic Sound.
Oh yeah, I keep meaning to try to track that down and find it.
But it's.
But yeah, largely they just made music with guitars and pianos.
I know Paul later on was using technology in the studio. Famously, he poo-pooed the Fairlight. He didn't really go for it very much, but he did end up using other bits of technology, so I'm told. But I just wanted to address. There's something I've been trying to flick between managing the show and the chat room. There's exclamations of surprise that I don't have a DX7, and yeah, that's true. I'm as surprised anyway. And then people say, "Yeah, but he's got a DX5 behind him. Why would you want a DX7 if you have a DX5?" Oh well, where do I start? There is actually, I want a DX7 Mark II because that has a lot of different stuff going on. Essentially, a DX5 is two DX7s in a single box with a better audio path and the ability to split and layer, which was brought in to the second iteration of the DX7. But then the DX7 Mark II also featured micro tuning and fractional stuff, and it just took it to another level. So that's why I still want a DX7. And I've got my eye on one on eBay at the moment. Fingers crossed. It's in Barnsley. So I might pop round for a beer. Ben, I know it's kind of not too near you, but
Yeah.
maybe it have to be a
Well, it's close enough.
long distance beer. We'll wave at each other from the other side of the bar.
Yeah.
Keep social distancing, yeah.
Yeah,
I've got to
quite.
tell you this, Robbie. I bought a DX7 off an associate, somebody I was working with in the studio at the time, and he said, "I've got a DX7." I said, "I don't use it anymore." He said, "You can have it if you want it." I said, "How much?" And he said, "Well, make me an offer when you have a look at it." So I went round, and he brought out this proper flight case. Not one of these like covered in, sticky stuff. It was like a proper full quality flight case. I opened it up. There was this absolutely pristine Mark 1 DX7 inside, and he said, "It comes. I've got a stand as well." He said, "And a breath controller." He said, "Got 2 cartridges and this book." And the book was the complete DX7 bound thing. And I was thinking, oh, he's gonna, this was the 90s. They weren't very popular then. I was thinking to myself, he's going to want about 350 quid for this, easy, I said, "So how much are you thinking?" And he said, "Well, I'd be happy if I get around 70 quid. And I went, oh, all right then. Yeah, I'll have that. And so as I was running off, it worked perfectly. The breath controller was still functional, and I sold the book on eBay for like 50 odd pound as well. So it meant that it cost me absolutely.
You should have hung on to that book.
Yeah, fill out the band still got my DX7 in his loft.
So the book, the Howard Massey book, the complete DX7, he did a follow-up called the complete DX7 2, which was just rewritten for the to take into account all the differences. Those books go for at least £100, and they'll go for even more if they come with the flexi disc example sounds. The 7-inch flexi discs. They were all tucked in there.
Yeah, I had that.
So those books on there, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's been out of print for years, and I keep looking for them. You can get it online as a PDF. That's not too difficult to find, but to actually get the book is crazy. Just this one book, but it is probably the best way of learning how FM synthesis works, because Howard was a bit of a genius. So they are great things, but those Mark 1, I'd like a Mark 1 DX7 because, again, I said I tend to buy things from a historical perspective, from a kind of an emotional thing, and the DX7 is the one that started it all, really. I mean, it wasn't the first FM synthesizer, but it was the big boy. So I'd like to have one of those one day, but I think I'm leaning towards a Mark II, or even just the TX802 module, which is the same without the keyboard. So we'll see. But those things.
I've got one of those.
A Mark II or a TX.
A TX802. I've got one of those. A friend of mine's currently fixing it. He's been fixing it for about 2.5 years, maybe.
Yeah, fixing it. Yeah, he's probably sold it. There are a couple on eBay at the moment.
No. Yeah, I don't know. I was going to say about the you'd like the Mark 1 because of the historical, significance, the features of the Mark II. Yeah. Wasn't there a grey matter response E chip or something that you could put in the Mark 1?
Yeah. So what happened? It's kind of like
pulling this out of the memory banks here.
What's happened with Behringer recently? So back in the day, the DX7 was a great synth. It was the most popular synth. Still, I think it's the biggest selling synth of all time. But it's certainly lacking in certain areas. So obviously the MIDI implementation was slightly off because it was 83. So it hadn't really kind of settled down, and only had 32 patch memories. So third-party companies started making stuff, and the Grey Matter E card was the most popular one, and there was another one called Supermax. I think it was Supermax card, and they all did different things, or they all did added features. So expanded memory, better MIDI implementation, and there was other little things that they made. The card made the DX7 do that it couldn't do out of the box. And then Yamaha got wise to this and saw all these companies producing this stuff. And so when they made the Mark II, they built a lot of that functionality into the Mark II. Not all of it, but a lot of it. And then Grey Matter come along and say, all right, well, we're going to add to the Mark II. And so there was a Mark II board as well. So, yeah, it was, again, it was a first in many ways. It was probably the first synthesizer, because it was digital, allowed third parties to come along and make modifications and generate a whole business model off of those things, as well as the preset world. I think we've got the DX7 to thank for that. So it's but I have been offered in the past a DX7 at the time, and I didn't have enough money, but that had, I think it had the Supermax board in it, and it's almost like I don't want to buy it because it's been tampered with. I like original. It's like my cars nowadays. Long gone are the days when I used to drive cars and modify them, stick a spoiler on the back or tint the windows or change the alloy wheels. Now I like everything to be stock. I don't want anything to, sort of get in the way of, what it was supposed to be. So it's like, I've no modifications on any of those things back there. Anyway,
said, by the way, that you should get the book now for $6.15 on Amazon.
The complete 615. That's crazy. That's absolutely bonkers, isn't it? And that's just a book. Native VS says he'd love to have a GS1, but wouldn't we all?
Let me jump in and with a question for Thorsten. So spent a lot of time. Well, actually, we have spent a lot of time chatting, but a lot of chatting with Americans and English, and also Mark, who's Scottish. And what was your experience growing up? When did you start playing music? You're originally from Germany, and you now live in London. What was the music scene different? Like between the two places, or just tell us a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, I mean, started making music was very early. It was 4 or 5. Grandpa started teaching me classical guitar and grandma piano, so very, very early, and all very classical. Coming to school, it started of the 80s, and came into all this pop stuff, which became more important, and the rock bands, hard rock bands, and later heavy metal. So then there was synth pop coming up, all this stuff. So started to add a lot of flavors to it. In Germany was rather tame compared to the rest. So I mean, one of my best lines is still there was a band called 66 Sputniks in the 80s, and we've been in a very religious household. So my mum was a bit of a wild beast on the other end. So when they brought out their band LP, and I wanted to buy the LP, she looked in my face and said, you can have it for a month of detention. And there was no question. It took half a split second and said, okay, I'll take a detention, yeah. So I had the LP, and was one of the coolest in the class. So, but it was not that easy. So there was a lot still to fight for in Germany at that time, because they were more conservative than the Americans at that time. Moved to San Francisco afterwards, which was just the polar opposite, because it's the spirit of freedom, So that was quite different. They had lots of different things. Red Hot Chili Peppers just started growing up when I arrived there, so Flea and all the guys had their fun. There were a lot of influential elements. Yeah, it was late 90s to start 2000s. So there were lots of influence for myself, which I really am very, very happy for. And another band which influenced me heavily was also Faith No More at that time, because the singer is just mind blowing. I mean, he's the second most skilled singer with Freddie Mercury we had over the last half century. They stand out because of their capabilities, and I loved their experimentation and all their stuff, and also that music was not like in the 80s. Everything was a bit pop was all about beauty and lots of silly text, and nothing made really sense. I mean, we had before already nonsense with Strawberry Fields, yeah, but I thought the 80s topped everything somehow with being hilarious on that end. And then bands like Faith No More made suddenly socially critics things which had real meaning and real grit to it. So it was very different. So, and coming to London changed also a little bit. London has a cultural fights going on, and we have a lot of grime and all that. So London is a bit different in things from the sound, but it has a very typical British sound in lots of things. Also, that they're standing out, so they're very different again. So quite interesting to see cultural the differences there. But at that time when I came to London 13 years ago to be settled officially, I mean I lived before really in hotels here, but when I got together with my wife and settled here, I've been already working for long in writing music, so I was more influenced by the other work stuff. So like writing for games, which is very specific and each time very unique because you need to focus on what the game is feeling about, and it can be like every kind of movie from Terminator feel to a happy Disney movie to whatever. So you have to adjust constantly, so you don't have any single outstanding feature which is your flavor, which continuously is used in all songs. So the identifying parts are very little in my case. So because I'll have to really adjust to what they need.
So I've got a question for you, Thorsten. So you hail from Germany. When did you leave Germany? What year was that?
Let me just think that I don't say
the
wrong one.
So
because it's 26 years ago.
Mid
1990.
Okay.
1996.
I have a friend out in Berlin, a guy called Mark Reeder, who was pretty instrumental in setting up the kind of the trance music scene over there, and was the Factory Records guy during the 1980s. So pre Berlin Wall coming down, and he always talks about the constraints of being in West Berlin and how that just manifested in so many different forms of music and and different stuff, and then this kind of explosion. So did you hail from the east or the west, or what were your memories of?
I was from the west. I was born in the west, and I mean the Berlin was always also under more constraint than the rest because it was surrounded by the east. So it was just half a city in the east, which was west. And it was just mainly surviving on military transports and heavy military support to keep it safe. Mm-hmm. So they had a far more different life than the rest of Germany, I'd say, because they had often eerie situations where people were running from the east and then you see them shot and whatever. So there was quite a lot in the news about that often. But I mean, I was born in southwest of Germany, lived afterwards Hamburg, Hanover, and then in the Midwest in Essen, close to Düsseldorf. And the south is very, very conservative. So it's really like as conservative as you can sing here in the UK, I'd say. So then Hamburg was rather a wild city, to put it mildly. So Reeperbahn and everything had an influence how the whole city worked. So they were quite wild. The harbor made it also international, so you had a lot of international influences there. So a variety of international superstars living there. And then in Essen, that was pretty much part of the center of the when trance, techno, and everything came up. And so when this all was moving forward, there were a lot of parties around Cologne, Essen, Düsseldorf area, and a really strong core there, and there was quite a lot. I mean, endless amounts of drugs, which was making it look like Woodstock in certain ways. But yeah, I mean, it was a heavy party zone, and the area was also pretty poor. So it's more like Liverpool, I would say, like like Liverpool, Birmingham, not so rich cities. This kind of area, yeah. So I'll fought my way out of there and gone to US for studies and everything. So yeah, it was quite different areas, but I mean, I can relate to the stuff that, so with restrictions. The later I got, the less restrictive it was in the way of. I mean, we had shows like Tutti Frutti and whatever, which are not known over here, but I mean, that was the only thing the girls were string tanga and everything else was not. So, which was TV culture at that time. So they got a bit more free spirited and everything, but they still had their other very conservative end. So it's not all that free. So like Sunday you can't go shopping in Germany, as example, and stuff like that. So everything needed to be finished Saturday morning. So your weekend life was in boxes. You can't do any loud noises on Sunday afternoons, and so there was quite a strange way. And when I left that, I felt quite liberated.
I mean, I love Berlin as a city. I think it's a fantastic place, and there's a great film called it's called B Movie, the Lust and Sound in West Berlin, 1979 to 1989. This is a really long title. And it's a documentary about that entire the decade before the wall came down, and then what happened afterwards. And it follows my friend Mark around as he's kind of like telling the story of his experience out there. And it was just like this melting pot of huge creativity, because they, like you say, they were this little enclave, this little island in the middle of Germany, surrounded on all sides by an oppressive regime that didn't like them, didn't want them there. But it's a fascinating film, and some great electronic music in the score. It's some fantastic. I'm not going to try. I send a new button. I'm probably nowhere near close in the correct pronunciation of that. But there's some great stuff out there. Great stuff. Cool.
Could I, Thorsten? Could I just ask a couple of things before we move on? Just wondering about you saying it was quite conservative and you felt quite, I don't know, restricted in some ways when you were there. You were glad to get out. Did that affect your creativity? When like, did you have this like burst of creativity, or was you more? Was you just as creative, back in Germany?
It was different because while in Germany, I had to hide quite a lot of stuff. So I mean, I worked with a couple of friends which are still doing Gothic music, so this kind of stuff was very frowned up to. So like The Cure and all this kind of things at that time were good examples. So that was a very disliked area. I liked heavy metal, so I was a big fan of going to Rock and Ring, seeing Ozzy and all the guys, and all that stuff. So I was a bit of an outcast due to that. I mean, I still got my hair from them still, so hasn't changed. So I've been always a rebel. So, but I think it was very different because you needed to constrain it. So I had fixed times when I could do some stuff. So it's also like I had my school stuff and whatever, and then early work school things, and I couldn't do it at any time when I wanted to. That was the biggest change. So I had to keep all the things in memory, and I mean, this kind of technique of writing in the head then helped me quite a lot, because that's one thing where I learned from my grandfather and also Rimsky-Korsakov and all these classical teachings, was to be able to construct orchestral sounds, so how to write for an orchestra, and that required you to think a lot how you want to position things before you even put anything together. So you think quite a lot, and this kind of thing helped me to be able to just write at any occasion in the head, have the idea more or less already properly complete in the head what I want to do, and then go. And that change, that need for only have this as a main tool of writing changed then to I could write at any given time when I wanted to when I left. So because there was not this was constrained, there was nobody frowning up you or stopping you from doing this kind of thing. So that was one of the bigger changes. Yeah, so you could. Yeah. I mean, now I have the kids blocking me time-wise, but not. Nobody would say I can't do it because they don't like me to do the stuff. So that was the biggest change. Yes.
And the other thing I was going to ask, just quickly, and it's for my own personal curiosity, really more than anything.
Yes.
When you're working on a game soundtrack, how does that differ from working on a movie soundtrack? You was on about the kind of dynamic aspect of the soundtrack got to evolve in different ways than a movie soundtrack would. How do you go about that? How does it?
Yeah, I mean there are two ways of doing that. So one is soundtracks which are based like on MP3 loops and special single push-ons and then changing the loops, which is more like traditionally writing a song. But then you write the overlaps and everything. You make you often use like very impressive tushs and whatever to just cover over that you switch from another track away from the original part from the loop. So, but I'll worked on quite a lot of development. There was an audio engine called Psy also, which is interactive audio engines, which are now commonplace inside the big audio third-party manufacturing engines, where you got to interactive tracks, and that's changed everything. So you write them pretty much track by track and can combine those together and change them over the time, and that made soundtracks react to the game itself. So you really wrote and could change how things felt by really acting actively on something. And so what then happened is it just added a lot of complexity. So you wrote the same. You have a jungle theme, and then you have jungle theme standard. You have jungle theme fear. You have jungle theme excited, in danger, whatever. And these blend over, but they all need to still represent all the sub elements of what happens: surprise, low down, whatever. And then you need to make blends between all those, so you have to write a lot of samey soundtracks, which are just expressing different feelings and everything. So it was in a way, adding a lot of freedom, but also a constraint by you have to really deliver a lot more. So yeah, I mean, and there are two ways of doing that. One is like an MP3 file of snippets, which are just mini parts which you can stick together, or sometimes they really offer that you can really go and write 8-9 tracks, and they are combined in any way or shape or form to create the main thing. So, and then you have to write the intelligence afterwards, which controls how the whole score acts to the whole thing. So you write the score at the end, how it interacts. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. It's very informative, but I think I'll be sticking with what I do now.
What about generative music? You know, for example, the game No Man's Sky, where the music is. I don't know how it's done, but I'm told that it's it's created within it doesn't stuff isn't written or scored. It's just the game creating the music. How does that work?
I think they're using some AI with basic music rules, and some flavors they need to store some kind of presets to make it work in a certain direction. So I think it's just based on Euclideans or whatever what they wanted to use. I mean, I have the game, I played. I mean, it's good fun and it sounds fantastic. So, but due to the way it does sound fantastic, I presume they have a AI which writes inside frames, I would say. I mean, I think they have some kind of rails where it runs down and writes freely inside the rail. I think that's what they did. I mean, because the whole game is procedural, everything is procedural. So, and everything creates a correct result. So this also doesn't work plain procedural. So you have procedural on rails, but on really good scale.
It's a fascinating game,
So it's one thing. I mean, it's one thing, Mr. David Braben. I mean, he's a super smart guy, and he wrote it in 80s with Elite. And if you think about that, your C64 or I mean MSX1 and all these machines at the time, when you think they had about 16 kilobyte of RAM, and he stored in 16 kilobyte of RAM more than 100 million suns and solar systems and everything with names, then no, it doesn't fit into the memory. So the intelligence behind that, how to make this, is just plain impressive. I'll have no other words for it. I mean, these are very, very smart people doing a excessively smart, very focused element of the work, and I just don't understand this. I don't even try to go down that lane. It's just really high mathematics and very, very, very intelligent use.
It's really coming forward now as well, the AI thing, isn't it? Because I saw on the news today that there's actually an AI Eurovision Song Contest now, isn't there? Where the computers have apparently wrote the songs with a little bit of help from humans.
Can't be worse than what normally goes in, though.
I know, yeah. I was thinking that. I mean, some of the examples were awful. They were pretty bad, but yeah, the AI for you taking over.
Did you guys ever see the Brian Eno app? called Bloom.
Yeah.
Some of that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you want to go for generative music and want to be odd, look at what Jean-Michel Jarre did. This is his absolute legacy. He wrote an album which is just endlessly regenerating. So, and it's always new and always running. And I think he said it's running for 200 years or whatever before it runs out of content. Yeah, I mean, you can do crazy stuff.
There was an album by. So, have you heard of the duo Ortekra? They're kind of like a glitch kind of. So they're very kind of niche electronic music. You know, they were kind of pre-Aphex Twin, but very glitchy, very just quite an acquired taste. Well, they did this project called Gescom, GESCOM, and it was released only on mini disc, and it's got something like crazy number, like 140 something tracks. I might be wrong. I've got it, but I haven't played it for ages. But it's like 140 tracks, and they're all 20 seconds, 30 seconds. There might be some that are a little longer, some that are a little shorter. But because of the way that mini disc works, you could skip tracks instantly without any pause. So it buffered stuff, and so whenever you skipped a track on mini disc, it was always instantly there. So what they then decided to do was produce this album with all of these snippets of music, and then what you had to do is you just press shuffle and press play, and every time you got a different piece of music or a different arrangement of this thing, and you could just go on, and very rarely would you ever get the same thing twice. So it was fascinating stuff.
The Eurorack world has really gone after the generative music more than anything else that I've seen, and so having Euclidean stuff, I've got Mutable Marbles and Pamela's New Workout.
Nice.
I'll probably have some other stuff they can do too, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of a fun thing, and it's way outside of my traditional music making experience. So it is kind of fun to let stuff play and see how it goes. Or even, I don't have a Make Noise Renee, but to put it in a different package where it's not your normal sequencer, but a kind of a grid, 3D grid.
Yeah, I'm not a massive fan of taking the music making process away from humans, but I like it as maybe an inspirational tool or something that that is built upon. It can provide maybe a foundation. But I think music without human influence just really isn't music, is it? In my opinion.
Yeah.
That goes back to like kind of bringing things together that you wouldn't think could go together. And so when I had got into Eurorack stuff, I eventually found out about VCV Rack, which is a virtual Eurorack stuff. And so there's a whole community because it's free, and lots of people making videos. And I was watching the videos like, well, this is it's either like kind of techno music or it's just pure generative ambient music. And I was like, is there something in between there? But I wasn't really seeing a whole lot of it. And so like, well, let me see what I can do. And so I made this track completely within VCV Rack, and then I inputted, within it, I made a couple of their version of Mutable Plats and played a live solo with my X key into it, and I left a bunch of space and added. I took one of my Strats and a homemade fuzz pedal and Strymon delay and put it all together. And like, well, this sounds cool. And it's different. It's hearing different sonic textures that don't normally go together. And then after I posted that, like within the next few days, like all of a sudden there's a bunch of people putting out VCV Rack videos with them playing that and guitar together. I was like, whoa.
Fripp, Robert Fripp was big on that kind of using guitar and effects technology to come up with all these kind of ambient loop type things, and very clever man. Very clever man.
I think the future of the AI thing is possibly not as a writing thing, but as an accompaniment. Like Logic have done it with the drummer. How it just like kind of follows you and It's
Yeah.
all based on grids, really, but it is kind of sensing that we're going to have a chorus coming up here. I'm going to stick a fill in and jazz the beat up a bit, and I think that as it gets cleverer and cleverer, we'll have we'll have these plugins that we just start playing and they all join in and we're
I mean,
away.
you should try Jamsticks. You should try Jamsticks. I mean, that was one of the first drum AIs, and what they did was going along that so that it can listen to your song and understand these. But I think where they just made it really fun was that you could stick in any type of drummer AI to the whole thing. So you could have a Phil Collins plugging in, or like the guy from AC/DC, or so you had different drummer AIs, and they played all the same stuff completely different.
Wow.
And it was pretty interesting. It was never the same. So you had always slight differences how they played things, but I mean they reacted to your music really nicely. So I can see the future of that.
Yeah, Logic Drummer has that same type of technology where they have different virtual drummers. They have like Kyle and I can't remember what the others are.
Yeah,
it's probably the same idea behind it.
Everyone was losing their shit back in the day.
Probably bought it.
When the Fairlight came out and synclaviers and computers in music, and musicians unions were just like saying no, can't have this. It's going to take everyone's job, but it didn't, because these things required humans to do it. So it was more about reskilling rather than replacing. And yet here we are now talking about AI that is genuinely replacing human beings making music.
Yeah, I remember in the early times with the synthesizers where there was even from the musicians union a ban on using any electronic instruments for movies. I'll remember that all couldn't use a synthesizer for ages for that stuff. So because it was same applied to the games at the time. So it was a very interesting thing. You needed to always use live humans for everything. So
when they did Top of the Pops over here, which for those that aren't from the UK, Top of the Pops was the weekly pop TV show it started in the 60s and went right through till the 90s, I think, before it died. And there was a period of time, particularly around the late 70s and early 80s, when synthesizers were coming in and duos were a thing where they could produce a whole song with just a couple of synths and a drum machine. And the musicians union implemented a rule that said if you're going to appear on Top of the Pops, you have to re-record your track with actual union members playing the music, or they would play it live on the TV show. So out of shot would be the BBC band that would be playing it, and the singer from the band would sing along to them. So they were just trying to protect everyone's jobs, but bottom line is, it didn't last very long before they had to kind of say, okay, fair enough, we can't do this. But it's funny. We seem to be freely talking nowadays about AI, music, like it's a great thing, and actually this is the one that could potentially, make people like us redundant in terms of, not that there'll always be a demand for it, but there's certainly in your industry, Thorsten, AI surely must be a threat or considered a threat for music.
No, music in our industry has one thing. It's like in movies, it's used as a weapon to control the player. So not at the moment. I think AI is not capable of getting there yet, because AI can't understand the emotion of the situation and also how to do the different kind of feelings, and because you need to sometimes you need to compose mischievous so to support what the game is about. So because sometimes if you play the game again and then know the story and know what happens there, then you sometimes even get the cues and say like, oh damn, it was shown already here, I should have picked up on it. But that's one thing which AI failed completely, utterly. And AI can do generally good stuff, but I think expressing different feelings on the same situation is far more difficult. We've seen like when they've done it with the Bob Ross paintings, when they're getting close, but the human touch is missing somehow. I think they're not yet there. They don't have this kind of inspirited envision on this creative spark, which is not there. So it still sounds a bit monotonic and too predictable.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. Even if they
No.
try to be chaotic, then even then it's predictable in a way. It's kind of odd to say, but
No,
that's how I
no
feel about them.
ambition either. Don't forget ambition. That's
Yeah,
a driving force in a lot of music, isn't it?
Right.
yeah.
And then there's Ben, who has a robot in his band, right?
Yeah. He does produce music as well.
Excellent. Right. Well, let's
I mean, I never forget when I see Mötley Crüe electronic as robots.
let's move on to something else now. And I think everyone's talking about this, which I will play, but I guess again because I'm having trouble routing the audio. So this is the documentary by the wonderful Alex Ball, the Electromotive, the story of ARP instruments, and it's been since yesterday. It's been buzzing all over the internet. It's certainly in our world, and I watched the whole thing today. It's an hour and 50 minutes, I think. So it's yeah. So it's a long thing, but I didn't feel like it went it dragged at all. It's so well made, and some great interviews with all the key people that were involved, and some really interesting stories about behind each of the instruments. So the way that Alex tells the story is basically through the instruments themselves. So he takes the timeline and then talks about each one as they go through, and explains what was different. And there's lots of nice little humorous touches in there. I think there's a bit where Alex says only a real nerd would go through and explain all the differences between all the versions of the ARP Odyssey. So let's talk about that. And then he goes through every single one, but in a way that is simple to understand, because I didn't realise how many different versions of each of these instruments there were. I knew there were a few, but it's just crazy. And of course it talks about the ARP as a business and how where it failed, the two big instruments that kind of killed them off, and then what happened towards the end. So I tasked the guys with watching this beforehand, so we'll go to Ben first. What did you make of what you saw so far?
Amazing. Alex has done a absolutely wonderful job of this. It's just, I mean, I was watching it with Vicky, my partner, and she wasn't that keen on me putting it on, but she ended up watching it as well, getting into it. It's actually enjoyable for anyone, I think, but especially if you're a synth nerd, you're gonna absolutely love it. One thing that the others will want to talk about the synths and that, but the music in there as well. I don't know how much of that Alex has composed himself or where it was coming from. There was one showing the potential of the 2000, the 2500, and it's just an incredible piece of music, like really good. I've got no chance of getting one of them, but I do want a pro soloist now after watching that. It's a great documentary. It's thoroughly recommended. He's done a brilliant job.
I'm just trying to look through the credits here. I've got it up on the other screen, and who has played what, because a lot of the music that's in there is Alex's own compositions, and we know that Alex does these great little demonstrations, and he layers stuff up. So he'll play multiple parts and then stitch it all together. But I did notice that Mark Doty contributed a track to the soundtrack, and it's just coming. I'm just getting some stuff now. So Lisa Belladonna's done some stuff on there. Don Monroe, Alex, of course, has done his own stuff. Try to whiz that through. So Mark Doty provided a track on the Art Pro DGX. But yeah, I think most of the music in there has been done by Alex, because I imagine that on a project like this is what impressed me about this. This has clearly been done, with a very tight budget. And I'm not saying that disrespectfully. I'm not saying it looks, cheap and nasty, because it doesn't. It's the exact opposite. But I know how much money goes into these sorts of things, and what he's done is remarkable. But he would have probably had to have provided a huge amount. And Marco Etlich is on there. The guy off YouTube who does what's his? I forget what his channel.
Retro.
Retro Sound.
Retro. Yeah, that's it.
So he's provided. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in there. So that's really interesting to see. But yeah, some great music. Cryss, I know you watched a little of it.
Yeah, I just got to do about half of it this morning, and so I sent over a note to Thorsten. So I don't know if he had even gotten the time to watch it yet either. But just to repeat what Ben said, the music on it is great. It's just great to stick it on and listen to it, and to hear that ARP character. How's it sound? It's you would think like, well, here's a Moog competitor during the same years, but they have a different sound. The filter sounds different. And then, of course, like, if you're watching it with the family, I mean, you can skip a lot of it and just go, look, here's R2D2.
Yeah.
But they probably skipped over quickly.
I like the fact they got to talk to the Close Encounters guy, because the guy who played the ARP 2500 in Close Encounters was a tech guy from ARP, and they just got him in to do it all, and that was great to see him present day talking about his experience. And how the fact that the mineral oil that they burned to make the cloud effect covered this 2500, and they had to trash it in the end. It's terrible. So Thorsten, did you manage to squeeze some time in and watch this?
A bit, yeah. I had something about a half an hour into it, but it was really bad for me, man. This is really, really bad because it causes massive amount of nerdgasm-induced gas. It's just really bad. So, you're just like trying to look at your bank account when you watch it, so it's figuring out where can squeeze something out. It's just fantastic. You can see the love he has for the ARPs. That's one thing which is sparkling out left, right, and center. It got this lovely attention to detail, talking about all these things, being able to catch up people, like you said. I really loved the sound of it. It's really showing what these instruments can do. It's not what you would expect from old instruments. It was pretty advanced for its time. Moog was pretty blunt compared to what they could do in technical ways. They could really go far beyond what Moog was capable with in Model D and everything. So Moog was bigger advanced at the beginning, but they're gone with the Model D just the opposite direction, so that we've gone far more simple in one box, very strained, and ARP was going just in a box but very open, and you could do crazy stuff. And I'm definitely looking the whole thing, and I can't wait to finish it. But I fear I'll have to rob a bank or two.
and the brilliant thing is it's free. It's free to watch.
I can say anyone who loves synthesizers, watch it. It's just good, but just keep your wallet hidden.
Is anybody then now considering the Behringer version, since none of us want to put out about $3,800?
I think one thing is also one thing which I've seen always in the discussions is not like because there are a couple of other companies which also make like Behringer's re-versions of everything. One thing is lots of people just saying, oh, it's only a Model D one version, this one, and it must be from the 1974 drive or whatever. If you're in the mix, you don't hear that subtle detail. You can hear it when you sit there, have next to each other the two models, but if you want to make music, the carb, the barb, they will be all perfect to make music, and they do the job. Exactly. So
I have a sad story to tell. I've shared on Jamie's channel, but my neighbor across the street, one house over, has an original 70s ARP 2600 in his garage that he hasn't touched in 30, 40 years.
How have you managed not to go and steal it?
You should tell him you can recycle it.
It won't be a crime. They'll let you off. You're liberating it.
Yeah, he plays like rockabilly music and folk and stuff like that. I'm like, hey, do you want some guitar equipment for your broken synthesizer? I would trade you something for it. No luck so far.
Well, just ingratiate
Tell him
yourself.
you got some. I mean, LG can tell him you got 3 dudes in England which would just sell their liver for it, you know.
Well, I'll tell you what. When you guys come out here for the NAMM show sometime, we'll go over and storm the house.
Yeah.
I'll do the big Italian thing. Ooh.
Yes.
So I'm about 2 meters high, so I should be also helpful at
So
that.
I'm going to make a confession here. As much as I loved that documentary, and as much as I appreciate the work of ARP and everything they did, I wouldn't be one of those guys that would spend. It just doesn't float my boat. I don't know why. I appreciate it. It's like BMWs. I appreciate the engineering and the quality. I just don't really. It doesn't really do much for me. Controversial.
Is it because it doesn't make this sound?
Exactly.
Oh, wait, it's jump, yeah?
Yeah. No, I don't know why. I mean, I really get it, and I've got GeForce's Oddity. I've got the Arturia. Is it the Arturia 2600? I've got all of those, and yeah, they're nice and stuff, but I don't know. There's just something just doesn't do it for me.
Yeah.
There you go. I said
So when you saw that 2500 there with all its nice retro silver finish and those knobs that looked like they were in a Russian James Bond villain's like technology center.
There.
You're not desperate to just get on there and start pushing stuff, and I'd love to have a go with that.
I think if I was walked into a room with a 2500 and said, "There you go, you got all day," then I would probably, I'd play around with it, and I might be turned. But I don't know.
Yeah, I fear it. It will happen, Robbie. Be careful.
Do you know? I mean, I've often admitted that I'm a digital guy. I've always been a digital guy. My only analog synth that I have, the first thing I had was Mattel Synsonics drums, and then I got the 101, and I've got a couple of the little tabletop things. But they have never. I thought that maybe they would lead to other things, that they would be the gateway drug, and I go out and buy another DX. I'm a lost cause, I think.
Well, my confession is that spring reverbs on synthesizers sound terrible to me.
Well, that's the 2600 out.
And you never get a good spring reverb on a synthesizer. I mean, I don't really care for the little short tinks that they use in the 2600 or the grandmother. I mean, to me, a spring reverb's got to be a long 3-spring, like out of a vintage Fender or something.
Yeah. Try the Uher thing. You can adjust it to the songs. That helps sometimes. I had the same problem. I had a tank, and I sold my tank because I couldn't get it to work with my stuff. But the Uher twang strum does work. So because you can interactively attach it to your synthesizer, so you can control it, so you can make a thing so that it works with your patch specifically. So that helps.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I actually prefer the spring reverb on the Strymon Volante or the Flint to use with synthesizers if I, get to feel the need for that. But and actually, I prefer those over. I've had the real Fender spring reverb tanks. I've had numerous amps. I still have Princeton that has a smaller tank in that one, but I've had vintage twin reverbs and all sorts of stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I always go to hall reverbs.
I think I've still got a Marshall keyboard amp downstairs in the garage somewhere with. I think it's the front grille is just now falling apart, but that's got a spring reverb in it. Because every time you move it, you can hear it just rattling around inside. It's an awful thing. Awful thing.
Yeah, they did that with the OB6. Where if you slap the side of it on the spring reverb, probably on your Pro 6 too, that it creates that rattling spring sound.
Yeah,
but nothing beats kicking the side of a guitar amp.
So we got about 10 minutes left. I just wanted to go on to our last little topic. So it's one that's been kind of close to my heart this week. So those of you who have watched the videos that I've been in, probably notice that things are looking slightly different, and I've managed to. That side of the studio looks rather nice at the moment. This side over here is just a pile of cables and mess. I mean, on that table there, you've got TX7, QX5, RX17, MPC 500, Sculpt, Craft Synth, Uno drum, all on that top shelf crammed in this horrible mess at the moment. But I've been relaying my studio, and I just wondered what kind of rules that you set yourself, rules that you follow when you do one of these things, because we all have to do it from time to time, either because we're bored or because we need to accommodate some new piece of gear. But I've kind of had to really think about layouts and stuff. What are your opinions? Anyone?
Yeah, I'm just starting to read. Yeah, please, Ben.
I'm constantly doing it. One partly because I keep moving, and now I'm in this tiny. I feel like Philip Schofield here.
Really?
It's like. But this room is tiny, so trying to get everything to fit in here it's just really hard work. So I've got this like unit that goes round here, but the legs of the unit are 19-inch racks.
Oh,
so everything's down here really. But then when I start, I get terribly OCD about all this. And when I'm packing it up to start again, I think, like, where's all that OCD gone? Because this is just a tangled mess of spaghetti and bits that I don't know what they do. But when I was doing it, I was so meticulous about having the right coloured leads, going to a certain thing. I try and get like the audio leads and the MIDI leads to match colour. I set the colours up on the mixing desk to match and the tracks in Cubase to match. So I've got a troubleshooting route back through anything, because I always presume that nothing's going to work when I do this. I'm quite lucky usually it does work, but I have all these procedures in place to fault find everything, and because I hate being around the back of a rack, like on your side with a torch, trying to see what's plugged in. If all your MIDI leads are black, then I couldn't cope with that.
I started off with all the best intentions today, because that was all completely unwired this morning. Now every instrument is fully MIDI connected. There's a hub underneath here that takes everything in, and then unfortunately, because of the layout of the room, I have got cables that are kind of going in front of a doorway there. So I'm kind of wondering whether I should get a mat or just unplug them when I'm not using them, and that's just a pain. So I'm kind of restricted by the shape of the room, and there was just no way of getting around it, because I think I've pointed out before, I've got the sloping ceiling on one side here, and so I can't get that on this side of the room where all the main sockets are and where the computer is, and I can't put the computer over there because there's no plug socket. So I'm always going to be losing. So I've kind of done it the best way that I could, but I mean I've probably I've tucked it away now. When I'm working during the day, I sit here sketching out plans of the room, and I take measurements and everything, and then I work it all out on paper. And actually, the way the room is now is pretty much how I had it on paper. But I did try 3D modeling stuff, and I couldn't learn. I was no good at that stuff. So I did try doing it electronically, and just never had any hope. Thorsten, I know that you've didn't you you showed me some kind of rendering that you were doing for some fittings that you had there.
Yeah, I think you can see my screen now, no?
Yeah,
I mean, let me know when you can see it. So, I mean, this is pretty much what I have at the moment. So, and the problem for me is it's just going up and everywhere. It's really hard to work. So, my new tribe will be slightly different. So, we'll sit very differently and have everything very different. So, the Lasers will be a sliding tray. Under the keyboard will be away and forth as I need it. The subwoofer goes down there, and then pretty much everything directly in hand reach without having to get up anymore. So that was one of my main things to look at. So just really go away and having up there still space for other synthesizers and whatever I need. But For me, the ergonomic element is really the main things that I can work on all stuff directly straight away without having to get up and have to run too far. So I can reach everything by hand while sitting is one of the key elements for me, because time is money, as they say usually. And if I do have to run around everywhere, so I'll figure a way of syncing in all my reg synthesizers. Just as you see, they go down really down there in the back end. And therefore, there's suddenly all available in my control just directly in front of me on my 88 keyboard size. So it's just like an extended piano, and you can grab everything, which I think will help me with my creativity and what I need to do. So because it's very helping to be very focused and not have to suffer through searching and running around and having to get up and down and up and down. I think for me that was one of the big deciders to now go for this design. I mean, it's not yet completed yet, but I mean, you see the direction where it goes. I mean, I have a space for the Hydra synth down here, so we can place it there, which should help.
I'm not entirely sure we could see this. I was just trying to grab a screenshot of what you're showing on Skype. I don't think that was actually coming through on the feed, so I'm just going to try and see if I can. Let's see. We go there and. Excuse me. That.
Sasquatch says, my biggest challenge was finding room for 2 88-key Kurzweils.
That's a challenge. That's a challenge.
Oh, yeah.
No.
88 keys go a long while, yeah.
No, I can't seem to get an image of the thing up, but yeah, it looks compact. Do you?
Yeah, I mean, it's next to my wife's nice bed, because I mean, I was before in the room with my kids, where my kids are now, so that was my private studio, and then I had to move out of the room because the kids came in one by one, and all three, and then so I had to use an L shape to work. Yeah, but I mean, as I said, at the moment it's far more inconvenient because everything is high staked and not very efficiently put together. So I'll really struggle. I have to jump up to get to switch on the TI really, and have to. I mean, the TI is at the moment at 2.40 meters.
Right.
So literally on the top of the roof. So I have to go on the bed to click it on. So I'm just going away from that now. So it's far more convenient. So yeah.
I kind of forget how lucky I am sometimes to have a room that is just, for me, for my stuff. I couldn't bear sharing it with children.
Yeah, I mean.
So.
Yeah.
What about you?
But in London, it's not so good.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Cryss, what about yourself?
Yeah, I'm fortunate to have a room here set aside for this. So I'll show just a little bit. I mean, main thing in the center of the room here, I'm trying to monitor, but I'm not sure if I'm doing a good job. I've got my computer is usually sitting right here, and so I can look out the window while I'm working on music. And behind me, I have like my Eurorack stuff, my synth rack, and then as you go all the way around, yeah, this is getting awkward here. There's guitars and amps on the other wall. And the main reason that I've done that is that I need to have things set up. My strategy is that if it's not set up and ready to go, I'm not going to use it. And so I have my interface is over here on the computer desk. I have cables going, miking up amplifiers. I have my synth rack and mixer all into my interface, so I can pretty much just turn a few buttons on, power buttons on, and then load up Logic, and I'm ready to go. And so that I can just sit and spend time making music rather than get everything set up. So that's largely been my strategy with all of this. And then the guitar hangers, the flame maple going across the wall, my dad and I did. So one of my challenges before was that I wanted to use a very certain guitar, and I had to get it out of the closet, out of the case, and then I would just not do that. So for me, having things accessible, and then also just the enjoyability of having your gear around so you can look at it as you're working, it puts you in a better mood for creating. So that's kind of been my setup. So I've really got it in kind of three sections, like synthesizers, computer, and guitars. And then what you can't see right behind my computer is my desk is L shaped, and I've got the Moog One sitting behind there. That's kind of like the room divider. But yeah, that's pretty much my philosophy
Yeah,
in it.
I think we all have to adapt. I hate being constricted by the room, because I mean I could just do so many different things, but unfortunately this is the only room that I can have. I did try and persuade, because our house is kind of like it's sort of L shaped. It's probably more T shaped. So the main building is like the top of the T, and then we've got a double garage with the main bedroom on top of that, and that gets quite cold in winter because it's the garage is underneath, and so I tried to unsuccessfully persuade my wife to say, can I have that room and we have this room as our bedroom? But this room, because of the ceiling, you can't get much furniture in here, like a wardrobe, and because she's a lady, she needs a big wardrobe, so that was out of the question. So it was this or nothing, and because I rent as well, I can't change the fabric of the building. I can't put power sockets in where power sockets don't exist, and plumbing, cabling, behind the walls and stuff. So my dream is one day to own a house with a basement, and then the basement is my studio. I can just go down, shut the door, and I'm in my own little world. So one day.
Yeah. Good.
But has anybody else used these things? This is my first time experience with Jasper's stands. Now I'm looking at Ben's shot. Are those Jaspers behind you? Yeah, and
Yeah.
what are your overall
Yeah, we
thoughts? Yeah, you.
Me?
good.
All right. Yeah. I mean, they're quite versatile because I mean, this is like ridiculously high at the minute. It's set up like on the actual workspace, but I can still reach things and that. But really versatile because when I've moved house, I've had to have this in different configurations, for the space that I've got. And at one point, it was only about this wide, and it just had like a mono synth all the way down, and it just slotted into this little space I had. But they're great. I mean, that's mega sturdy even up there. It's cracking value for money, and you can expand them or have it as simple. You could just have one synth on there if you wanted, or probably how many have you got on that? How many
that's
tiers
6.
is that?
So if
7.
I tilt the thing, you can see I've got the Prophecy and the 101 on the top, because I had to go for the 150 centimeter width to get the DX5 and the Fairlight, and the next one down is 120, and that's my only quibble with their stuff, is that it's either 105, 120, or 150. There's no in between. There's no way of adapting it to a custom width, which I suppose those are fairly standard sizes. So what it means is that because I want the DX5 as my main, because when I stand there, that's kind of at the perfect height, and the Fairlight as well, I want to have access to that probably more often than anything else. But it means that the Emax has to sit down here, and then the Fusion, I've only got the 6HD Fusion, so you can see there's a huge kind of gap either side of it, and I just think, there's some wasted space there. But also, that's the heavier synth, the DX5, and they recommend that you put the heavy stuff down the bottom, but I want to play that, so it's. But to say, I mean, I threw it all up there yesterday, and like you say, it's just you just bolt it all together, set your angles, tighten everything into place, put the locking rings on, and that's it. You can just leave it, and it seems really sturdy. But and I also like the fact that if I want to maybe at a later date put a laptop stand, I can just buy one that clamps on. Monitor stands, I can buy those, clamp them on. If I could do the whole thing, the Fairlight at the moment, see the keyboard's over there, but the actual mainframe, you can just see it just down there. So I've got to run cables. It's just unfortunate the way that it works. What do you use, Cryss?
Well, I heard great thing about the Jasper stands, but they don't sell them here, at least not that I could find. And so my stand that I've got over here, actually, let me move out of the way here, is a stagehands. It's a 3-tier.
Mhm.
Let's see, let me find my. So you can see I've got my Juno. I've got like an OB6 and my Waldorf and a mixer there. And then underneath it, to save space, I've got some extra guitar amps and a bass amp underneath there, the little smaller ones. But that's worked with me well. And then in the corner, you can see over here, that's my old road case for one of my amplifiers. So I just set more stuff on top of there. And over here, then next to it would be the matriarch and the Euro rack, so that they can all be pretty close and tied in together. And if I want to run one module to another, I can do that fairly easily. But the on-stage stands, sorry, if I said stagehands, it's on-stage stands. It's been pretty good. And then, like you, I just bought some extra pieces for it that I needed.
Yeah, it's. I think that's the other thing, is that when I was trying to figure out how to put all this together, is having things close to other things that needed to be close to other things, and this is about as good as I could get it with a short cable run that goes across the floor. So it's this is where I think this wireless MIDI might actually help me. I don't know quite how it's going to work with all of these keyboards, but I'm interested to find out. Oh, well,
yeah, keep us
says in
updated.
the chat room, where is it? I've lost it now. He's gone. Actually, Native VS said that the width of the Jaspers can be dealt with a large saw, which maybe after the warranties run out. I've just lost what. Oh yeah, Asia had said, how do I play that bottom keyboard? Alamoog Taurus with my foot. No, actually, to be fair, the Fusion is probably the keyboard I play the least at the moment, or have done for even a long while. But it's actually nice to have it there, turned on, because everything over there is controlled via a MIDI controller over here. I've got a Keylab 61, so I can play any of those synths and just select my routing in Logic, and everything's controlled from there. So they really are just mostly. Just there, so that I can use them, and then the DX5 is the one that I like to play on its own the most.
So Sasquatch says, I'm going to use some of those scaffolding tubes when I get my new shed delivered, and he'll be able to mount some CS80s or something.
I mean, when you think about it, the simplicity of this stuff, I mean, it really is just... and I don't mean any disrespect to the company, but it is just aluminium tubes with plastic clamps. Now, I have an Alesis Crimson drum kit downstairs in the garage, and they use just the universal size tubing clamps. And these, whether they're slightly different make of plastic, I don't know, but they're all pretty similar. You could probably put something together yourself if you had the time and the inclination to cut it all and buy the individual products. But I think something like that, I think that's I was choking on the price a little bit to start with, because that's £300. I think it was £320 for that stand, and then I paid an extra £30 for two arms to put that MS101 on the top there. I had just buy 2 extra arms. That was another 30 odd quid for that. So they're not cheap, but I have to say, damn good. Good stuff, worth every penny. Anyway, I think that kind of draws us to a nice conclusion. I'll just put my wine down there. So I think now we're just on 10 past 10. Probably time to wrap things up. And I think we've managed to kind of get through most of this show with a few little glitches here and there. But we'll have to see. I have to try and find out what was behind a lot of that, whether it's just everyone's on the internet or something closer to home. But anyway, so first of all, let's say thank you very much to our guest, Thorsten. Thank you ever so much for joining us. What you got anything planned for the coming days?
Pleasure. I mean, the also will use it really to make some stuff. So I want to make music now a bit, just get a bit head free. But I mean, having the kids around will make it a little bit difficult. But I think I can make them run a bit low fuel in house, make sports with them or whatever, just to get them exhausted, and then hope for the best that they're just flat on the sofa and I can sit upstairs a bit.
There's a lot.
But yeah, no, making music.
There's a lot to be said for drugs.
Yeah, I'm still looking for something like something which makes them nicely sleep. Some helping.
Lots of Calpol.
Yeah, but I think they added something to make it available to a certain degree, and then the kids just puke it out again. So
anyway, thanks ever so much for joining us, Thorsten. Really great to have you on, and good luck with.
My pleasure.
I'm sure we'll have you on again soon. Cryss, thank you, sir. You've got any plans for the coming week?
I'll just keep making more music and working. So I did something really awful, and when I was trimming the last of my oranges off my tree, I cut through my ring finger. That was about 2 weeks ago. So it's really prevented a lot of music making. I'm still able to do sound design, but I haven't been able to touch guitars or anything. So really waiting for that to heal up so I've got some new song ideas that I started tracking before this happened. So I'm looking forward to getting back to that. But in the meantime, I'm still just finishing up sound sets. I'm working on the Artur Micro Freak and Rolling System 8 right now. So
cool.
That's about it.
Great stuff. Well, thanks for coming along. And finally to Ben, who's gone all blue on me now. So, Ben, what have you got planned?
Well, I'm actually planning on spending tomorrow in here, finishing off a bit of wiring because I have had another change around recently. So there's still a couple of elements of it that are not wired up. I'm going to sort that out. I might have I've got a movie that I need to start working on. I've kind of put that off because of the coronavirus business, but they're going to start getting a bit impatient soon, so I better start on that. And also my little side project that I'm keeping quite secret just because it sounds really boring and I don't want to put people off.
Well, you can't just do that. You can't just tell us you've got a secret side project and then not tell us what it is. We'll get out of you next week.
Oh, it's just... Yeah.
Excellent. Well, look, great. Thanks ever so much, everyone, for watching. Thanks to all of you who've persevered with us in the chat room. Asiohead, Wagyu, Sasquatch, Native VS. I'm just going through here. There's been loads of others flitting in and out. Your perseverance has been most rewarding. So we do it for you guys mainly. So hopefully it's been a good couple of hours or so. I've got all of next week off, so I'm going to tidy this shit up, and that's about it. And drink more of this stuff, and put my feet up for a bit. So anyway, thanks ever so much, everyone, and we'll see you hopefully same time, same place next week. Bye.
Cheers.
Yes, guys.
See you. Bye.